Good afternoon. It's hard to believe that we're to the last of the church music forums. I mean, where did this semester go? It's absolutely unbelievable to me. And the rush of things I know I'm feeling today, and I'm guessing that perhaps you are as well. But thanks for coming, and thanks for being here for this important time. Be sure you sign the roll. Be sure you watch carefully for emails. There are church music emails that come out periodically. I'll send things out to students. If you're not getting those, if you would let me know that. Occasionally, I think Sam Johnson got dropped from the list a while back. Somebody told me somebody wasn't getting emails. It was Aaron, yeah. And I don't know how that happened because Aaron's been around a while. But anyway, if for some reason you don't hear after, I don't send you something every week, but every while, just say something. So anyway, just be sure you're on the list. I just happened to mention that because I haven't said that in a long time.
Do you want to mention next Tuesday evening before, did you plan to?
Yes, thank you for saying that. Next Tuesday evening, Michael Gunger will be here at 6 at this time in Recital Hall 2. Michael Gunger will be in town I think on Monday night, and then they're kind of in transition between here and San Antonio, I think, later in the week. And so he's going to hang around and be available to speak to students at Baylor on Tuesday night at 6. So hope you'll have made plans already to be a part of that. Yeah. Any other announcements that I'm forgetting? Because I knew about that, but failed to put it on my list. All right. We're very glad today to have Dr. Carey with us. Dr. Cannon is the relatively new minister of music and worship at South Main Baptist Church in Houston. He's been there for a little over a year, having come there in July of 2013. He holds a Doctor of Musical Arts and Choral Conducting degree from University of North Carolina, Greensboro. He has a Master of Arts in Choral Conducting and Vocal Performance from George Mason University and a Bachelor of Arts from Furman University. He came to Houston after spending a number of years in Charlotte, North Carolina, 9 years actually, as minister of music at Providence Baptist Church, which is a lovely church in that beautiful city. He was also, at that time, he was also associate conductor for the Charlotte Children's Choir and adjunct faculty for the University of North Carolina Charlotte Glee Club, Men's Glee Club, so I'm interested to hear some of those stories. Prior to his call to ministry, he was stationed in Washington, D.C. as a bass vocalist with the U.S. Army Chorus and traveled with that group and sang for all kinds of important events, as you might imagine. He also was a chorister with the National Cathedral Choir of Men and Boys. Carey and his wife Janet have been married since 2003, and they have 2 children, Caroline 7 and Duncan 5, whom I'm guessing we are seeing in front of us.
I don't know how to block that screen.
So I was guessing this is, if you're interested, is Dr. Carey with no glasses and no bow tie. So you're getting a fuller story here. But thank you so much for being with us. It's an honor to have you on the Baylor campus.
Thank you
so
all.
Welcome to you.
That was my inaugural swim at LBJ, so in Austin, which, up to that point, we were pretty depressed because all we knew of Texas was Houston. There we go, so much better. When you leave the Carolinas and you come to Houston, Texas, oh man, it's quite the thing. So I was happy to be able to get away and see the hill country, which is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's different, but it's beautiful in its own right. And that was fun. I married into a lake family, so I had no choice. So glad to meet you, and I want to know from just as I begin who you are. I asked Dr. Music what your backgrounds or interests were, where you came from. I would imagine, go ahead and just generically, just raise your hand, contemporary Christian, CCME kind of folk, raise your hand. Who are you? Born and raised or found church in that environment. Be proud. Yeah, and so more of a traditional worship in choir, organ, that kind of thing. And then somewhere in between. Hey, that's good to see, and you're right. It's a pretty good cross section. I essentially I guess I'm not that young anymore. But I came up in through church and in my home. My father was a minister. My mother played the piano for our choir, organ, traditional worshiping church in Greenville, South Carolina. My voice dropped when I was in 8th, 9th grade. I did Danny Zuko my freshman year, and then I had the falsetto, and then it all went away. And so I started helping Dad out in the choir and singing. My dad was the administrator, not a pastor, head pastor, but the church business administrator. So that was my knowledge of church. So I was setting up tables, tearing down tables, making sure lights are out. I'd leave my high school parties, and I'd drive by the church, because that's what you do when you're the PK son, and race off all the kids who are making out in the parking lots, and smoking pot, doing whatever, and being proud to do so there in Greenville, South Carolina. But got a sort of a backdoor underbelly view of what church was like when you're the son of a business administrator. But music was there, took piano, and oddly enough, I will say, of course, anymore, what is the true pipeline of a church music person? Who knows? But for me, I deviated substantially. All of my mentors, all of my instructors and leaders, folks such as Dr. Beam Vick Jr. at Furman University, Bill Thomas, Glenn Atkins, Dr. Glenn Atkins, who was a minister of music in Greenville South. All these guys, my father went to Southern Seminary. I remember as a wee lad, a gentleman by the name of Phil Landgrave, Don Hustad. I was young and small, but these names were iconic. So this was sort of my exemplar. These are my exemplars. And of course, I will never do ministry just because I saw it all. I was like, that's not what I want to do. And of course, I get to Furman University, and my freshman year vocal performance, although I'm sorry, I think it's ragweed or something. I never had allergies in the Carolinas. There's pollen everywhere, and I was just fine. I come to Houston, and it just like, boom, it hit me a couple of days ago. So, but I'm there as a freshman at Furman, and it's vocal performance. And eventually I would come to, maybe you've had this conversation with yourself. What am I going to do? Right? Maybe that's why you're here, because you're like, there's work in church. Because everywhere else, I was doing vocal performance. I'm like, if I would have the chops to make a living, provide for a family. So what do? You leave the music degree and you go to communications. And because I thought I'd be a weatherman, broadcast journalism. I thought I'd do well with that, the voice. But I spent 90% of my time in the music building, doing the operas, doing the choruses, doing the choirs, doing my vocal recitals, the juries, everything. And wrote my communications papers about music topics. My org-com class, organizational communications, was about the orchestra. So I just always found music, which I find was an interesting and helpful track, because all my colleagues were burning out. And they were burning out. These were electives. I took sacred church music classes and church music lit as an elective, and because it was fun. I loved it, and all my colleagues were just stressing because it was their major. They got, so I think that was kind of helpful for me. But I left there and essentially had a conversation in the hallway. You think these little hallway conversations in the music building are trite and whatever, but one was quite profound. That I remember my chair of the department saying, I just left an ACDA conference. For you non-choral folks, that's the American Choral Directors Association up in New York, and a friend of his from the U.S. Army Chorus, they needed a bass, a low bass. And all the guys that had been auditioning were big, heavyweight, big guys, because, basses mature at the age of 40. Most voices come to their full fulfillment at the age of late 30s, early 40s, and basic training is kind of tough for a man at that age who's not been physically fit. And so their folks have been trying out for that position, weren't right, and so he said, do you have any young guys who have low C and beyond? And he said, I do. And he told me, and of course he said, it's a men's group. I said, oh, it's awesome. And it pays this. And it'll pay off your student loans, which I was at a little arts college at Furman, which they're in a PK, so you do the math. And so, yeah. And where is it? D.C. What's the name of the group? It's the Army Chorus. And I said, hell no. So I go home to my mom expecting her to say, no, you're not joining the Army. And she saw those dollar signs and said, yes. I go to D.C., right? Well, before I do that, though, I'm in basic, I'm in basic training, yeah? And my head is shaved. I just was in Prague, Czech Republic, singing with the Furman Singers, doing these gorgeous concerts, choral concerts, right? And the next day, I land at Atlanta Airport, take a van to Fort Bend in Columbus, Georgia, and my head was shaved. I had shots in both arms, and a guy was telling me when I could use the restroom. And talk about a culture shock. A girl writes the Dear John letter. I'm crying in the shower. I'm being just mutilated by these drill sergeants. 9 o'clock at night, we're all asleep in the rack, and 2 weeks in, the door opens, and drill sergeant, total line, everybody's in the line, he goes, where's roster 109? Right here, drill sergeant. And he said, before he said that, he said, all my life I've had cannon cockers, I've had communication, infantrymen, I've never in my life heard of a singer. And so I got pummeled in basic training for a couple of weeks. But last week, we're doing our FTX, where we're exposed to gas and live rounds, live fire, and no sleep, no food for 3 days. The guys were scared. I was older because I was out of undergrad. These kids were 18, And I come out of the shower and they said, Cannon, because I was a platoon guy at the time, and he said, Cannon, one guy said, can you sing us something? I said, what? Sing us something. I just was like, and so in those moments, what do, right? Amazing Grace, yeah. Right? So I just sang Amazing Grace, and there's always 60 bald heads in this barrack, and many of them just started sobbing, just crying. And I sat there, I thought, why? Because up to that point for 10 weeks, I was like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. Then I realized, got it. And I reported to DC, and the job entailed me sang for heads of state and dignitaries there in Washington. And not shortly thereafter, 9/11 took place, and I was the first responder at the Pentagon. Our job book as a chorus was about this thick. It's a men's chorus in the Army. There's a chorale, a co-ed too, but I was in the men's group, and it was about that thick before 9/11, and then after 9/11, we just, doing a number of gigs, singing for World War II vets at the dedication, Reagan's funeral. There was just some really powerful moments in that position. And honestly, we shook a lot of great hands. The Queen of England, you name your best country singer, whomever, right? It was a pretty cool, slick gig. I just didn't feel like I wanted to sit in a chair and do that for the next 20 or 30 years. I had an itch, and that itch was to conduct. And so I went to George Mason, and I worked on a major there. And all the while working in church. Because you got that church gig, right? So I'm a bass vocalist, and I'm helping out. I'm working at an Episcopal church, because the Baptists up in Virginia were kind of, the Baptist churches just weren't quite right, because I grew up a Baptist. Did I say that? I grew up in that church. In Virginia, I just couldn't find a good home there, and so I stumbled upon Falls Church Episcopal. It was sort of a moderate Episcopalian church, but traditional worshiping experience. Shortly thereafter, I met the organist who moved to a more charismatic Episcopal church, if you can imagine. The rector was from England. He was a Baptist, English Baptist, with a tambourine. We would lift high the cross, and then the very next thing would be, the gradual hymn would be, soon and very soon, and you whip out the tambourine. And then we would sing. It was just the most bizarre, spiritual, but then we do a psalter. And it was kind of just bizarre. Ushers dancing in the aisles, and we're doing, and I just thought, what am I doing? Because this is like, the notes up here. And I was highbrow. Traditional worshiping, went to Furman, and true old Episcopal kind of broke me a bit. I was like, this is pretty cool. And these folks are real. They're sincere. There's no facade. There's no veneer. I would leave that church to keep my sightseeing chops up. I decided to audition for the men and boys choir at the cathedral, the National Cathedral. So my Sundays, I would do churro, woo! I'd leave and go to the Nat Cat, and I'd sing a Mag and Mook in the Nash Cathedral. These beautiful windows. The preaching was awful, but because it's all PC and it's just a mess. But the music and the windows and the aesthetic spoke to me like I've never, just visually, just powerful. And I would leave and I'd go to Kairos, what I call fireside chat worship of another Episcopal church where all young pros worship, where I met my wife, like you do. And they were typical DC, Wheaton grads, Duke grads, Davidson grads, everybody converging. We're going to save the world, one widow and orphan at a time, and doing big trips across the globe. And great preaching. The music was candlelit, acoustic, but it was djembe, guitar, that whole thing. And it was fascinating. I didn't realize it. The education, that was good. And this is before this is early, this is 2000, so 15 years ago, and the Gettys had just kind of made the scene, and all that was sort of happening, and I just felt the nudge. The last gig at the Army Chorus, I'm standing there singing 1812 Overture, thousands of folks, and I want to just, leave and I march off. I'm like, yeah. Seen all the kitchens in DC, but I missed this. And I got into that, meanwhile I got into the degree, master's degree in conducting and vocal performance, and I just felt like, let's step out. Jen and I were married, and at that time, and I got a call about an interim position. And I say that because it wasn't full-time. Providence wasn't full-time. It was an interim position. And I go to Charlotte, North Carolina with my wife, not knowing how long we were going to be there. That was a call. I left the security of the military, medical, all that health benefits, everything. My wife had actually, just as a side note, had open heart surgery 5 days before I out processed. She was a volleyball player at Davidson, a great athlete, and just got dizzy one day and just found a hole in her heart. And so we had to do open heart 5 days before I had to out process. Didn't pay a dime. She had to actually go in a couple of times. So it was totally a God thing, timing thing. I go to Charlotte, and of course, for whatever crazy reason, they fell in love with us, and I was there for 9 years. And I left that security of the military. And here I am now in Texas. Left the security of all my family within minutes from our house. Grandparents, nieces and nephews, all the memories. Mimi's cast iron skillet, all the gravesides, everything that I know, the Four Seasons, and just the beauty of what is the Carolinas. And I'm in Houston, Texas, and I tell you, it's growing on me. It's growing on me, but it's a process. But we sort of left, and we heeded that call. And so I say all that, to say that's kind of got me here. And there they are, Caroline and Duncan. Could squeeze them. Love those kids. All across my time in Charlotte, I attended Montreat worship conferences. Because the Baptists, my parents, the Nibble Nook and Rich Crest, and the prayer gardens that I knew of back yonder here were no more. So I had to go to Black Mountain, had to go to Montreat, the Presbyterian conference, right? Episcopalians in D.C., Baptist rearing. You tracking it? Did I go to Southern? Did I go to Mercer? Did I go to Baylor? Did I do any of that? I didn't. I guess that was just in terms of telling you my story. That's one of the most important things I want to share. Now I realize that you guys are all in track. You're here. But what makes a minister of music? Anymore, it's no longer the pipelines that once were, right? Brad Jernberg, a good buddy of mine, he's on staff now at South Main, was at Cliff Temple in Dallas as a minister of music, and now is our administrator. And he went to UT. Anymore, that's not the standard. And not to say it's better or worse, but I definitely got an education through the military and all the eclectic worshiping experiences that I had. My godly counsel, my family. my church leaders, those sweet old ladies. Dr. Glenn Atkins, as a minister of music, said to me, he said, driving on a road down 85 one day, Glenn said, I was an intern while I was an undergrad. I was interning, helping out choir, so youth group. You ever thought about doing this? Like, doing this? And I said, no, I kind of brushed it off. Years later, a minister was preaching from James about the power of the tongue and the rudder, that passage in James. And for whatever reason, Glenn's words came back to me. And it was like this confirmation of my calling. And that was when I became ordained. I felt like this small sentence in question he asked me in the car, almost a decade earlier, came back, haunted me back. That seed was planted. I just say that to say your words are powerful. And don't discredit what someone might tell you. And don't judge, what someone, who they are, where they are, what church they're at, and what they may or may not say. God is always speaking. Yeah, God is always speaking. My father was a wonderful guide for me. Eric Nelson was a good friend of mine, is a good friend of mine. Just had him in South Maine a couple months ago. When I was on a choir retreat, he said to me, my church, I went to Providence as a master's degree. They said, you don't have a seminary degree. And I kind of, could you do some more education? I said, yeah. And I was like, you're going to go to seminary? And like, what is Greek and Hebrew going to really do for my choir person? I mean, maybe. Systematic theology has always kind of been a cool thing, I guess. I don't know, And I talked to Dr. Nelson. I said, Eric, he was at Emory University. And I said, what do you think I should do? He said, go to a state school. Get your terminal degree in music. Get a doctorate. And boy, was that advice ever right. I found myself in my choir rehearsals, these small things. I'm working on Stravinsky's Ledos, or I'm working over on, doing Vaughan Williams this, or things that are just, I'm singing and doing Bach cantatas and, conducting and singing the recitals at the same time and wondering, beating my head against the wall, this is crazy. And those challenges guided, I came to my choir rehearsal Wednesday nights, pumped, just fired up, energized. And the choir saw it. And then my professor would come down and observe me. So then we'd have these guinea pig moments with my choir. And what was happening is the choir was growing and knowledge and joy and excitement for the musical experience that we all had as I was getting mutilated with my professor, right? But that was just and I'm sitting there and it's like, no. Now, listen, don't you, and the choir's like, and they were working with us and they were part of that journey with me in my degree. So thank you, Eric, for that small word that he told me at a conference on the way out the door. And then lastly, my pastor at Providence, who said, I have got the phone call from that, this is important. And I hope that as you move into your next, wherever you're, that whoever your boss is, your pastor is, establish that relationship of complete, full transparency. I got the phone call from South Maine. I ran up the steps and went to Al's office, and I sat down and said, Al, I just got a phone call. And I can't tell you, of course, Al was a seasoned pastor, and he gets it, because he's done a lot of slow dances through his career. And he guided me through every step of that process. And that was a gift. That was a gift. I actually had a couple of churches looking, and so it was kind of a tense moment there. I didn't want him to learn of it through a committee showing up at a church, you know what I'm saying? I didn't want that to happen. And so I charge you to tuck that away, be fully transparent, and hopefully you'll have that relationship down the road with your ministers, your pastor. And then lastly, Steve Wells, pastor of South Maine. Look out, he's intense. He is amazing, an amazing pastor, passionate about Scripture, but he's intense. He wanted to be a fighter pilot when he was growing up, and kind of did ministry. And that's evident sometimes in our staff meetings. And he and I, we butt heads all the time. It's awesome. It really is. You know why? Because there's mutual forbearance. He's a lovely guy, and he loves me. We both love the Lord. And there's no pretense. There's no agenda. And so that transitions me to South Maine. Just to be clear, being a Baptist, raise your hand if you're Baptist or have a Baptist upbringing. Okay, so most of you. In Presbyterian, come on, Presbyterian, anybody? Boom. And then how about Lutheran? There you are. Go Bob. Awesome. Episcopalian, anybody? Any Episcopalians? Methodists? No Methodists, wow. So most of you are Baptists, but you understand that every music position at any given church, depending on the denomination is different in how it's perceived. And I'm sure you're aware of that. I'm telling you, some of you probably already know, studied in, I don't know, Sacred Music 101. But can I just say, in the real world, like when you're out there, like you know that just please be wary of that. Part of the reason I'm a Baptist, I'm not discrediting other denominations, although I've served and worked in many of them, but I love being perceived as a minister. I love to know that I can make hospital visits, and that I'm seen in equal light. Just say that to say I got a lot of buddies of mine who are at very big single churches or big, non-denom type churches, but carry some of those, the structure where the music team is kind of over here. And that's cool, and if you want that, like for example, having that environment might enable you to do other things in the community. Teach at a university, or conduct or work in a band or something on the side or something. At the Baptist church, it's a pretty full-time gig, so that's it. Now at Providence, they were kind enough to let me go to school, and of course I worked at a university as well. Part of it was because of a money issue. The church, one of their biggest givers, stopped giving, and it was about the time of the and so we were struggling. So I worked at the men's glee at the UNCC. You start finding the gigs that you can and making it work. I had 90 guys in this glee club. 80% of them were freshmen. And the majority of them had never sung in their life. It was awesome. We met in an auditorium. It was just unbelievable. You know what happened? 90 guys. The first day of class was like, no. They all thought it was music lit. Like they're coming to listen to the Beatles and Rolling Stones. And they're we're singing. And after the first day, I had to convince them that this was going to be good. That singing, a group of men together, was going to change your life. And it sounds cheesy right now, but I said those exact words. With that even more passion. And I'm proud to say the next day of class, they all were there. And we had an amazing journey. None of them had worn a tux in their life. And we had some amazing experiences. And some ministry was happening after class, on the way to the car, walking from class. Had some, and several, because I would have concerts at the church, come get credit, right? Members joining the church. Same thing happened with my Charlotte Children's Choir. I worked with some boys, the boys choir with the Charlotte Children's Choir. My youth group, and auditioned for the Charlotte Children's kids, came to our youth group. That's a very cool thing. So sometimes those church gigs can provide you that opportunity. That's a good thing. Embrace that. And sometimes they can't, but bloom where you're planted, right? Depending on that dynamic. So yeah, South Main is that kind of Baptist church for me. One of the things they embraced years ago was what they call indigenous worship. So back in 2005, they were trying to figure out who they were. They tried a contemporary service, and they realized only 50 were coming. They were paying for this band. Nobody was tithing and joining the church. They were like, why are we doing this? And so they stopped it. And they said, let's just be true and real to who we are, which is a traditional worshiping church. And they also said, we want to be indigenous. So we don't want to try to appease or try to claim the styles of other people. What is our voice as a church? And then I'm not hiring, I do hire professional musicians on occasion, but I really strive to utilize you folks, if you were my congregation. What is your gift? I see a horn over there. What you got? What is that? Nice. I mean, actually I got a brass ensemble that I work with. One girl, sorry, you just said the elephant, now brain just kind of went. She plays the euphonium. And, it's a little different. It's a great instrument for playing melody. It covers, it carries, it's great. So you work with what you got, right? High school students, adults, senior adults. What is indigenous? We do a ministry for mothers in the community that are struggling just to barely make ends meet. One lady had a phenomenal voice but awful teeth. And our ministry managed to get her to a dentist to fix her teeth. And one of the first things we did at our church when I arrived was the Shrove Tuesday service. I'll tell more about that in a second. And I asked this woman to be the soloist for that. Her name is Regina Hearn. Woman's got some pipes. I mean, she belted it out. I mean, Jennifer Hudson can't hold a light. I mean, it's sick. And she just, it was awesome. She's one of ours. Is she on the roll? Is she coming every Sunday? No. But Regina is ours. I mean, and that's indigenous. You know, that's, you know, it can look a lot of different ways. This past Sunday I had a violinist play the opening tune of a tune that was unfamiliar to our church. And she'd been visiting 4 weeks. And she just happened to show up to Sunday school with a violin case. And I'm wearing all black. I was like, all right, where are you going? What you got, you know? And she knew. And she was playing for HGO, the Houston Grand Opera, later that day. So I'm like, okay, so she's legit. She was a CCM grad from Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And I just ran with it. I'm not afraid. I'm not scared. I said, I got a tune I want to introduce to the church this coming Sunday. You think you can come? Yeah. What's the name? I gave her the hymn number. She came back. People were in tears. And even in the moment of preparing for worship that morning, I wasn't planning on a tag. The tune is Ye Banks and Braes. It's a Scottish tune. It's lovely. It's beautiful. All Saints Day. You cannot measure how you heal. We cannot measure how you heal. Is the name of the hymn. And right at the end, we finished, right before we were about to roll call the list of people who died that year. And I thought in rehearsal, I said, you know what? I just felt the need to tag that ending. She tagged the last two systems as I sat down and our pastor stood up to read and we chimed the names. And that transition created this beautiful moment in worship. She's been flogged with emails. She's only been visiting our church for 4 weeks. That's indigenous. And my hope is, of course, and it's not all about membership, but you know, that she'll find a family there, you know, looking for those opportunities. Low-hanging fruit. So I arrived at South Main. The hymnal we use is the Celebrated Grace hymnal. It was given to our former minister of music who retired as a retirement gift, his last Sunday, as a matter of fact, which was very hard because he planned all the hymns with this old hymnal. They had to switch everything over without him knowing it. But it turned out no one had ever had a hymnal dedication. So when I arrived a year and a half later after interim time, I was like, we had and I realized that, of course I love our pastor, God bless Steve, I love him. But I mean, he's got his favorites. And it's Come Thou Fount, and it's, you know, he just, you know. And I realized they had never sung a litany of these, just a list of these wonderful hymns. So I thought, let's have a hymn festival. Low-hanging fruit, that was easy. Shrove Tuesday, I mentioned it earlier. It's the day before Ash Wednesday. It is when we shrive, confess our sins. It is the day in which we are preparing for the journey. What do? You clean out your cupboard of what? Flour, sugar, the butter. What am I making? What happens on Fat Tuesday? Pancakes. New Orleans and Mardi Gras have secularized a wonderful sacred holiday. Did you realize this? Most folks don't, and definitely Baptists don't. This is kind of a Methodist Episcopal thing. But there again, I took that ecumenical knowledge and I said, you know what, let's have a Shrove Tuesday. Bacon brings them, man. I'm telling you. $5. We packed our fellowship hall. Children everywhere. This is South Main. You know. And I had a live jazz band in our, in our sanctuary. Now this is, I say it's South Main. And I told everybody it's going to be okay. And we all were downstairs. I got the sax, I got the trumpet. When the saints, they marched us in upstairs for our opening service, to start the service. I said a prayer. There was so much laughter, noise, just joy emoting up into our sanctuary. And we just sang all the great hymns, you know, Just a Closer Walk with Thee, and, you know, When the Saints, and whatever, I mean, all those songs. And there was dancing in the aisles. It was beautiful. Children on shoulders, clapping, Regina singing, the lady I was telling you about. And the next night, we're imposing ashes in the same space. You know, it's clearing out, thanking God for all we've been given, shouting hallelujah one last time, before that Lenten season begins. Low-hanging fruit, bacon and jazz, right? South Main had never had a senior adult choir. And they decided this past Sunday, this was taken this past Sunday. And there they are. Caution, the current screen size resolution is. So there they are. This is. I said, y'all ever thought about having a senior adult choir? Or we call it adult 3. And so that was this past Sunday. 52 folks showed up. We rehearsed 3 times. He leadeth me and have a little talk with Jesus. That's what we sang. And oh my goodness, you'd have thought I had, easy. Yeah, just easy stuff. How do I take this back? Oh, there it goes. What's some more low-hanging fruit? The Army chorus that I sing with, Clear Connections, they're coming in November. And it's going to be a wonderful experience. Can I tell you all a secret that you can't tell anybody else? I'm really stepping out on the bound here. I knew that many of the soloists who were in the group sang for 41, George Bush and Barbara Bush, the older Bushes. They live in Houston. I put a call. Don't tell anybody, because I can't. But you could run away, go, don't tell anybody. But they're coming. And nobody knows that on the 22nd of November. And sweet 90-some-odd-year-old George Bush is going to come. And Albie Powell's going to sing Old Man River. And Barbara's going to cry. And Steve Kramer's going to sing Bring Him Home, because he was Jean Valjean on Les Mis for 4 years in New York. And they're all in the chorus, It's going to be an amazing night of music. These are all buddies of mine. Each of you know your friends and your bands. You're experiencing your own folks in the next few years. You're establishing relationships. When you go to your churches, use those. Use them, right? Low-hanging fruit, yeah? How about some philosophy of worship? I'm going to just rattle these off. And maybe I'm crazy, maybe you've heard them, but hear them again perhaps. A ministerial heart. I know, cliche, right? How many children's choir directors have you seen? Or children's music teachers, not just choirs, where you're like, oh my goodness, she hates children. Literally. You're right though, am I right? Don't just think that because you're in this seat or because, this is how it's kind of happened that's just going to, that's integrally, that's vital. You have to have a ministerial heart. What does that mean? Love the novice singer. Love the volunteer singer who doesn't always show up. And for you contemporary folks, I took an email last week from a Houston church. How do I handle the situation? I've got this lady who really wants to audition. This is a contemporary worshiping church for the band, and she wants to sing, but and what he essentially came down to in the email, she doesn't look the part, and occasionally is under pitch. How do I let her down easy? Was the email blast he sent to a number of Baptist ministers of music in Houston, and that doesn't have to be just a contemporary. That could happen here too. Boy, I've been victim. And I received flack from letting that bad person who can't hold pitch, not bad person, but who can't hold pitch, in my small ensemble. The people who love to sing and everything's perfect, And I got Mike over here who, but he really wants to be in a group. There's a ministerial heart that has to be there. You have to stand your ground. Sometimes pastoral care, more so than score study. Right? There will always be a bigger church, a better choir, a slicker band, a Camelot, right? And a ministerial heart will keep you in check from that. Multi-generational worship is vital. I just attended the Animate conference. A good friend of mine, Eric Mathis, who is in Birmingham at Mercer, is started this Anima Forum, realizing Andy Root and a number of other great, good social theologians here around today are writing great books about how our youth is all in all. You're actually an oddity. The majority of our youth and high schoolers, when they get to college, then what happens? They find her or him, they get married, oh great. church, then they have kids, and it's like, we probably should go to church. And then it's kind of this weird thing that happens, and there's this gap of just missing it. And so we realized, as Eric realized, where's the most multi-generational moment in our churches? When is it? It's in worship. It really is. Think about it. A lot of times churches, their youth groups, they're worshiping somewhere else. They're not even in there. Or if you're a really hip, contemporary church, where's the gray wave, right? And I came away from that conference with amazing nuggets. One of them, I got this great tenor in my youth choir. His name's Andrew Klein. And I got this just full tilt, held-like tenor in my adult choir. And they kind of both, Andrew is kind of known as the guy's lead singer in my youth group. And John is the, anytime you do a solo for a funeral kind of guy, go-to guy. Why not put them together? A couple Sundays ago, John and Andrew stepped forward at the pulpit and lead in a duet. There again, low-hanging fruit. You'd have thought, oh my gosh, that was awesome. And it's an intentionality on our part. And beyond just having someone plug in a spot, do you have as a staff the trust to include youth in your worship planning? We're doing that. Our new creative worship approach is starting now, where we are actually looking months and months out, and we are gathering a cross-section of our church, 15 folks together, to speak about what they think and where they think the church is going and needs to hear from the pulpit or from the sanctuary in 6 months from now. We take those ideas, and then we as a staff will, depending on the theme and the focus of those sermon topics from our pastor, after that meeting, we'll go to the museum. We'll take our worship journals. We'll see the Monet exhibits. We'll talk about what comes to us. We'll go to the zoo. We'll walk around the zoo. Some of our ministers have children, they bring them with them. And we're unpacking. Sometimes we just break out and let us, where's that place for you? For me, it's coffee at Starbucks, or for you, it's quiet in my bedroom, or for me, it's, whatever. And then we spend a day, and we come back. And that's how we're creatively worship planning. We're incorporating youth in that mix, trying to make sure we're getting a pulse from everyone in our congregation. I think that's important, no matter where you are, what church you're in. Multi-generational worship. My last thing for philosophy for me is participation. Participation. I walked into South Main, and I thought I'd heard a singing congregation. So this was a random day. Daryl, our wonderful organist, who just happened to have won the AGO National Prize Award for 2 years, and is playing all over the world right now. Daryl had to get from the piano over to the organ. You ever been there before? And he goes into the back hallway, so it doesn't make a big spectacle. So here I am, it's a random Sunday morning, and he just decides to go after the anthem, beautiful anthem, great, plays the G or whatever, plays the chord for the doxology. And he leaves. And there I'm left with the congregation that proceeds to sing in parts and follows my gesture. Now, watch. Notice, at that point, I got control of it. They're following me. It's not much beat four. So I started to retard. And they're following me. And then I gave a big crescendo. I did. And I went. I just softened and just, as if I was conducting a Wednesday night choir. Out of nowhere on a Sunday morning. And it dawned on me. We do our congregation such a disservice.
You are ministers potentially going into churches where you are leading choirs. Oh no, we don't have a choir, it's a band. I know, you have a choir. You have the choir. And they're sitting out there. And you may not see them more than once a week, but there they are. And here's what I would say. If you're a contemporary worshiping church, turn on the lights. If you are going to your position, flip on the lights, please. And turn off the spots. And I would say, have coffee daily with your sound guy. And make sure you've got a mix to where their voices can be heard. The reason you see all these Facebook articles about contemporary worshiping churches now, is because they can't hear themselves. I call it the sonic assault, which, by the way, can happen with an organ as well as a praise band. So that's not a style thing. Make sure they can hear themselves, right? And make sure they can see. Don't darken the house. And then if you are conducting traditional worshiping church, don't, by all means, with leading hymns, just beat the time. Oh my goodness, it's such a disservice. You have a great opportunity for, and this is all the big three. Conduct phrasing. Conduct text. They're not idiots. Now, they may not be matching pitch. That's okay. Because they're all going to feel. They're all going to know and feel like they are a part of something. That is worship. I think participation in our worship is a huge thing that we're missing out on. And that can happen more than just with music, as you are well aware. And it can happen more than just like litanies. Those things are all vitally important. That's not just it. So here are my practicums. Oh, one other thing with participation. Men. Get the men singing. And you knew it was coming eventually, right? Because my dissertation was revolving around male choruses. How many times you see this? Everybody else holding in on you see this. Or, it's the guy who just, they're looking at the screen, it's like this, they're not singing. So what do? Well, you put the men and the women, right? And that works sometimes, but you have to work on getting the men to sing. Something happened in our country. I don't know if it was just the emasculation happened through the music clubs, where it became this rich old lady thing. I don't know. Because back in the 40s, what were the men doing? Glee clubs. Like, it was huge. It was the thing. The acapella groups have sort of stroked it a little bit lately, but how long is that going to last? I don't know. And they're very elite. The glee clubs were all men, and whatever fraternity you were singing. Find ways to get men singing, and doing so in an effective way. So here are my practicums. Hold a high musical standard. Don't settle. For God deserves nothing less. And I mean that. And you know what? There are no bad choirs, no bad bands, only bad directors and leaders. If you got an issue with something, oh God, not her, she can't sing, or this, they can never get this right. Well, that's on you. That's not on them. Get them to the best that they can be, and celebrate that. Right? Strive for excellence. Don't settle. I tell my youth choir oftentimes, I don't expect perfection, but I do expect you to strive for perfection. Nothing wrong with that. Pick quality rep and songs with theological meat, please. Y'all know this, right? But what's theological meat? Well, songs that speak about the gospel. Yeah, okay, sure. Well, we all know the gospel story. I think songs that speak to the Colossians 3:16 mindset. What is Colossians 3:16, right? Singing in the songs and hymns and spiritual songs. What's one of the words? It's a great word. Admonish. How many of our worship songs are truly admonishing songs? What does admonishment?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, in general. Yeah. So, come ye sinners, poor and needy. You know this? Yeah? Weak and wounded, sick and sore. If you tarry till you're better, you'll never come at all. admonishing, right? Not just songs that are all about, you know. And you know what? I come to the garden alone. Same thing. It's not just a genre thing. It's not a style thing. Not to say those are bad, but it can't only be that. It can't only be that. Lamentation. Songs that lament. We don't do that enough. Because you know what? Folks are coming into that sanctuary who are struggling. We're in Houston, Texas. MD Anderson's down the street. We have a lot of bald heads that come in our sanctuary. Women with caps. Because they're displaced. They're from somewhere else in the world. How do we speak to them through music? How are you orchestrating the hymn or song to encourage that? Now, I use the word orchestrate intentionally because of your praise bands, right? You know, sometimes we just full tilt, we're out. No, you know, we come to that admonishing or that struggling confessional verse, back off. And can I charge you, no matter where you go, what anything you take away from it, for the participation thing I mentioned, something else to take away for the rest of your life, every Sunday in worship, make sure there's an a cappella moment. Don't know how it happens, just make sure it happens. Doxology or a verse, you know, make sure somewhere they're hearing themselves sing. Some of these things I've already spoken to, the gesture. It should support the breath. So, you know, right, as you're leading, even if you're not a church that's conducting, have someone leading up front, let the band or the instruments provide room for breath. Right? You know, that they need that. You know, they're not going to do that naturally. And they need you to guide that and lead that. The organ and band supports the tone and allow them to be heard. We've already talked about that. One of my favorite quotes is my favorite text when someone asks about music philosophy, worship philosophy. Fred Pratt Green's text, "When in our music God is glorified." Pretty much sums it up. You don't know what I'm talking about? Go Google it on your way out. And adoration leaves no room for pride. It's as if the whole creation cry, hallelujah. How often making music we have found a new dimension in the world of sound that moves us to a more profound hallelujah. Let every instrument be tuned for praise. Let all rejoice who have a voice for praise. May God give us faith to sing always. Hallelujah. Right? It's a powerful text. I got about 8 minutes or so, and I went a little longer than I did. I get kind of excited. But do you have any questions? Brass tacks, you know, hey, what?
For someone that's in a very small church with no church choir, how do I encourage? What's a good way to encourage the participation and start really that process?
So how big is this? How big is small?
We're talking like between 30 and 40 people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think, so traditional, contemporary, what are we doing, guitars?
Mostly traditional, sometimes guitar and piano, occasionally a brass group.
They're your choir. That's your choir. And I would imagine you got 1 or 2 folks that sing, I imagine, that lead, right? Yeah. And you already probably are utilizing them, right?
Yes.
It's start at the bottom and start at the trenches. Have some voice lessons with some of these folks. Hey, Bill, I can tell you match pitch. You see, be the constant encourager. Even when deep down it's like, it's awful. Encourage them. They're not going to come if you don't, right?
Right.
Ooh, Bill. Bill, that hymn Sunday, you did a pretty good job. Hey, can we meet like 30 minutes before Wednesday or before? Do some you know, work with the piano and that's how you start. You start with that. It's a lot of grunt work. It's a lot of research, finding those right solos maybe, and those hymns where the range is not, you know, people don't realize like it came upon them, like these little Christmas tunes we all love. They're horrific tunes. Like if you look at it, they got these incredible leaps and these accidentals all throughout, you know. Find songs and hymn tunes that are really singable, you know, and that they can easily wrap the repetition is helpful. Teze worship, you know. doing something that they can work on the meditative aspect of what worship's like, But that's your choir, was 30 or 40.
You've talked about the importance of the congregation hearing itself sing.
Yes.
It sounds like the acoustic at South Main is very conducive to good singing.
It is.
How would you approach him singing differently if you were working in the church with not so good an acoustic environment?
So is it straight up pews, carpet, dead kind of a thing, box, typical deals that you're talking about?
Yeah, we'll say that.
Because I was going to say, is something creative you can do is, are they free to move the congregation? Like, I mean, if you ask them to get up and move, or do you have them come down and do intinction for Lord's Supper, or do they deposit offerings, and is there any kind of movement that happens?
Well, this isn't really coming from a specific.
Oh,
Yeah, this is more of a general question.
Oh, man, I mean, first thing I would do is work creative. What I was getting at was, the old good old fashioned, get them in a circle, holding hands, singing Blessed Be the Tie. You do that one Sunday in the year when it's, a special theme, they will always remember that. Oh, that's like we used to back when I was, or the doxology. Find those songs that without question they know. Amazing Grace, drop out in the last verse, and do what you can to encourage them. We did when in our music, God is glorified, that last verse, and I turned to David Ashley White arrangement, and I turned to the congregation, invited them to sing with the choir and the brass. And I gave a gesture. Someone told me that was my first day of being there. When you did this, man, we really felt, and we're just ba-da-da, and they're holding that last chord. We arrived, and using we arrived, we're there. Okay. What is your breath doing? It's constantly going, right? So you're growing, right? And I'm doing this with the stick in the hand, and I kind of gave them one more. Like, there's more. You're not giving enough. And I insist on it. And I showed it. Come on. And of course, I have joy emitting from my face, right? And just, come on. And they gave more. It's like, demanded of them. And then I would say, establish a committee and get rid of the carpet. I know that's an act of Congress sometimes, but yeah. This space matters. This space matters. And how does your space speak? South Main has a language. You walk into South Main Baptist Church, it speaks a language. Don't go contrary to that language. Don't try to do something, but go with it. We're actually renovating our space in the next 2 years. We're meeting next week to sign a new organ. So we're going to be building a new instrument. Nichols and Simpson organ, and Scott Rydell's company, an acoustician's come in. He's ripping out whatever carpet we got left, and we're going to improve. We actually have a very high 70-foot ceiling, stained glass. All of our sound's phasing up here, so it's actually kind of muddy. So we're going to clean it up, keep the 2+ second delay, but we're going to clean it up, get rid of the carpet here, and actually put acoustical absorption in the ceiling. They make a plaster now that can absorb, so that folks can actually hear the spoken word more clearly than they are, and of course the music will continue to ring out. So yeah, it's important. More. What else you got? Come on. Collaborative staff. Make sure you got a collaborative staff. Look for a pastor that's going to encourage you, not squelch you. And don't let them sell you a bill of goods. Let me tell you, that whole interviewing process, I just did that. Be careful. I had a lot of folks warn me. Steve's a micromanager, my pastor. So I sat down with Steve in the car, shut the door, and I said, so what are they saying? Well, I said, Steve, everybody says you're a micromanager and a control freak. That's what I told him. Let's just cut to it. And he said, well, yeah, you're probably right about the control freak. I try not to, we just talked about it. It's great. And it's funny because okay. But when you're interviewing, be honest. Do your due diligence. Ask colleagues, ask friends. Make sure the staff is a collaborative staff. You don't want to walk into a siloed situation. This is my ministry. That's your ministry. Ooh. How's the calendar run? Who chooses when, those are the kind of questions you ask. Because that's where the real rubber meets the road. So collaboration's the key, supporting you and encouraging you, all those good things. Anything else? Yeah.
how have you managed in stepping into a position where someone was there for a long time before you, to kind of step into your own, and not, maybe you talked about making some changes right off the bat. How did you manage some of that and walk through that situation? I'm sure it's walking a tightrope.
The very first musical number on the hymn sing was Tommy Coker and I singing from a Hale and Wilder duet.
Great.
Hey, right there. And that's what it boils down to. He was awesome. He was great. Truthfully, he didn't order any music the last 8 years he was there were some things he didn't do. But honestly, the man was 50 plus, how many years was he in ministry? I mean, he was at South Main for 25, the guy before him was 30. I'm number 3. South Main's a 112-year-old church. They had some interim small stints, but Thad Roberts was there for 30 years, Tommy Coker 25. Now in comes me. You talk about the next era of music at South Main. I mean, it's like, whoa, what am I getting into? But you embrace that. You love that. And you know what? We have a Smile International Chorale that sings at our church on Tuesdays from wives of husbands who are doing medical residencies. And they can't speak English, so they have a chorale as a part of their curriculum. And Thomas loved that. Hey man, do you mind helping me out? I got so much on my plate as a new guy. Can you do that? So he's doing that every Tuesday, and it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's what you do. Yeah. You raise them up. It's a good question. Anything else? Yeah.
I'm sort of, I just I just accepted a position actually at a cowboy church, and the difficulty I'm having right now is that I'm finding the previous music minister did not perform music with very much substance at all, theological substance.
Obviously.
And my minister, my pastor, seems to be a big fan of trying to introduce more theological concepts to the music.
Yeah.
But the congregation isn't seeming very receptive, and I was wondering if I should compromise in some regards, or if I should just really stand my ground on that particular subject.
I mean, I'd say if you got some internal, like, I would argue you may not be at the right place.
Well, I feel that the ministry is really
good.
Yes, is good. I feel that the congregation isn't very accepting of the ministry.
It's all about tending that congregation. Small steps, baby steps, and that can be with how you do that particular song on that given Sunday, to having some sort of a music festival thing or event or something.
Okay.
Is it all country music, or is it?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I saw my first cowboy church on the way to a Trinity Pines retreat. I saw that one right there, and I just about lost it. I stopped. I'd never seen one before, because I was new to Texas. I was like, look at this thing. had a corral, and it was bizarre. But, I never knew they existed. But, yeah, that's all. That's good luck. But I think compromising, working, and tending that carefully, do what you can. It's a mission field. Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your
Thank you.
Be sure to sign the bill sheet if you came in late. It's right over here. Whether you came in late or not.